So this is a video of a Norwegian explorer named Alexander Gammer. He's on a solo expedition to the South Pole, alone. He's been walking for 86 days. This is him. And as he's been going along, he's been leaving behind buried packages for himself to get rid of some of the weight, to leave food and extra supplies. He's lost at this point about 50 pounds in 3 months. He's tired and hungry. And that's him saying, I hope there's food in this one. So he's looking through this package. And he finds things like extra wires, pumps for water. And that. And he says to himself, did that really happen? And he walks over, and what he's so excited about finding after 86 days is cheese doodles.
Dobbel pose cheese doodles.
And so he's so happy to find a double pack of cheese doodles. And now he wonders, is there anything left? And he says, I took the subtitles out because I can't repeat all the words. Basically, he says, I'm very hungry. So he's looking through the pack. He's wondering if there's anything left. There's additional wires again, some sunscreen and Vaseline. And now he's wondering, are there any additional surprises for me?
2 stykker likevel. Ekstra trakt, den har ikke hatt noe. Ekstra trekktøv. Hva det jeg har tenkt, da? Har jeg det lagt inn dette her?
It's a chocolate bar.
Jeg har sikkert tenkt jeg har prøvd å spart vekk, da. Det er jo ikke mulig.
Why would I leave that there?
Hæ?
So that is, that's a bag of candy and Mentos.
Her ost! Hva Jeg lagt igjen alt her som jeg burde ha lagt igjen på det neste depot.
So he's tired and he's hungry and he's weary and he's lost 50 pounds and he's been alone in one of the coldest places on earth. And that's what happens when he finds cheese doodles, Mentos, and cheese, a chocolate bar. That's the kind of joy that can only be expressed by a person who knows what it's like to be hungry. A person who knows what it's like to feel alone or tired or weary or distressed, and then all of a sudden something that changes everything shows up. When's the last time you felt that way? When's the last time you made that sound? And do you expect to do that in church? Right. Do you expect that that's a normal response in religion or this church? Most people say no. And most sociological studies on people coming into churches right now say no, and not because they want to say no, but because they expect that this isn't the place for that. There's a lot of research being done right now that's wringing hands about the future of religion in the United States, at least, with all the trends of the unchurched and nuns, that's N-O-N-E-S, no religion growing, while traditionally churched people are dwindling, and every religious conference or group of ministers is people anxiously in a back room hiding, worrying that this whole thing's going to be done in 50 years. And a lot of it gets blamed on the generation called the millennials. The sociologists, who are generally not millennials, doing the research, say these folks just aren't interested in church. They're done with religion, which isn't true. The most recent data coming out of the Pew study, as well as the Barna group, 2 groups who study religion in America, shows that this generation coming in, I'm talking kind of 15 to 25-year-olds desperately want what they call a direct experience of holy awe and wonder. That when they come into a congregation for the first time, that's what they're hoping they will experience. And yet, it's not for a lack of interest. They just believe that once they get here, that's not what they'll find. Or as Joseph Campbell put it, modern-day organized religion is designed intentionally to be a block around wonder. This generation isn't uninterested in church. They just believe that when they come here, they're going to find hypocrisy. People who say one thing and do another, or that joyful expression of an ecstatic union and connection with something holy is found somewhere else but not in religion. It's the difference between what we say and what we do. It's kind of like this: welcome to this joyful church. We give thanks for this day, and we invite you to join this joyful community where you too will be loved. I've heard that. I've said that. A few years after I got here, maybe 2 years after my time called to the church, this is about a decade ago, a woman in the congregation invited me to have a meeting in my office with her because she was very concerned. She wouldn't tell me what she was concerned about, and I said, that's fine, let's have a meeting. And when we got into my office back before the new building was there, my office was kind of in the children's wing, and she sat down and she said, I have an important concern about you. Okay, lay it on me. She said, I am concerned that you are too happy. And further on, she went on to explain that not only was she concerned that I might be happy, but this joy might in fact be contagious. And she said she was worried that I harbored the secret goal of coming here to make people happy. And I said, well, how do you want me to make you feel? Miserable? And she didn't have an answer for it, and she's not alive today. And if she were, I would ask her if what she believed, in a serious question, is that if we are serious about what we're doing here, if we get that the world is a really challenging place and there is oppression and racism and violence and poverty and environmental degradation, if we believe this is an important place that matters, we can't have joy. Do we have to choose between depth and joy? On the order of service, at least, it says that we seek to be joyfully deep, but that's just something we print on the front of the thing. Whether we do it or not is an entirely different question. Some of the most engaging, amazing spiritual teachers that I look to, dead or alive, for wisdom, carry with them a sense of lightness that is only possible for people who have a direct, firsthand experience of something that makes life worth living. As Beth read in the reading this morning from Barbara Brown Taylor, something that saves your life. Think of somebody like the Dalai Lama or Archbishop Desmond Tutu, people who will go into a 10,000-seat auditorium just to watch them laugh. These are not people who are removed from suffering. The Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu recently wrote a book on joy together, and in the introductory chapter, they're being interviewed, and both of them say they have every logical right to be morose, or as Desmond Tutu described, as a sourpuss, and then tries to explain that translation to the Dalai Lama through facial expressions. What's amazing is that Desmond Tutu, this man who has lived through the extreme horrors of racial oppression in apartheid South Africa, who knows what it's like for black and brown bodies to be broken in his midst, who was saved from that violence perhaps sometimes only because of his clerical robes, still knows joy. The Dalai Lama, who was recognized as the reincarnation of the Tibetan Buddhist leader while he was a toddler, had to sneak out of his palace at age 15 in disguise when the Chinese invaded. He's been in exile from his home for decades, and he said, "They have taken everything from me. I will not allow them to take my joy." A couple of years ago, they were speaking at an event together, and it was time for them to come on, and they weren't there, and there's a big curtain and a huge throne that people put out for the Dalai Lama, and someone had turned the microphone on too early, and all of a sudden, everyone in the arena heard this giggle. Hee hee, hee 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 hee. And they couldn't find Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, and when they found them, they were behind the curtain getting ready for their performance by tickling each other. The exiled spiritual leader of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition and the well-known tireless social justice advocate about to come out and speak to the world, tickling each other. That year, the Dalai Lama was speaking at Yale Divinity School, and if you want to go to a place where all seriousness is encouraged all the time, that's a good one. And he was going to speak that night on a very important topic. When the dean of the Divinity School came to find him in the very nice hotel room that they had made for him on this Halloween night, they knocked on the door and heard the Dalai Lama say, "Come in." And when they opened the door, they couldn't find him. And all of a sudden, in a Halloween mask, jumping out from behind the couch, yelling, "Boo!" is the Dalai Lama. They have taken everything from me. I will not allow them to take my joy. One of the things that I love dearly about being in a progressive religious congregation like this is that we make absolutely no promise about what comes after you die. I have no idea. But I do believe firmly that this life is worth investing in, and so whatever is painful and whatever what's joyful, we have to acknowledge right here and now. The question is, do we have good news? James Luther Adams, one of our most top theologians of the 20th century, who saw firsthand the horrors of the Holocaust, came back and wrote about Unitarian theology, and he said that we have to be rooted in what he called an attitude of ultimate optimism. What he meant by that isn't that everything's just going to be okay. What he meant is that there are always resources available, divine and human, for meaningful change to take place. What he meant is that even in the most terrifying of circumstances, even in the midst of loss, of our bodies giving out on us, of a world that seems frightening, nothing can take away our ability to show up with love and courage. Nothing. And that, he said, is good news. Ultimate optimism, not immediate optimism. It doesn't mean everything's going to be okay tomorrow, but that no one can take away your ability to show up for the suffering of the world with love. No one. It doesn't mean ignoring the suffering of the world. It means acknowledging it and then immediately showing up with a life-saving answer. Immediately, in this life. It means that, in fact, as liberal religious people, we have a moral obligation to cultivate a joyful alternative to a suffering world. A moral imperative to joy. And what a time to take on the mantle of a moral imperative to joy. I know I'm relatively young, but this is one of the most fragile times in our culture's history I have ever witnessed with my own life. I am desperately worried whether my children and their children will have access to clean water, let alone a good job. Every day I wonder whether or not we're going to be going to war, or whether the potential of war is being dangled like a reality show cliffhanger. I wonder which group our government will come after next, and how we are going to sustain the repeated attacks on liberty and freedom, on justice and love. And in this kind of moment, it would be easy for us as a people to think that the choice we have is between cynicism and being dour only, or naivete. That perhaps the only options we have are to be angry, morose activists, or happy-clappy, superficial people in religion, and we all know who they are. We have these caricatures in our mind, and I don't think that's the choice at all. If there is a time for us to double down on what it means to show up to the suffering of the world with a joyful and loving alternative, this is the time. If you have wondered what the calling of us in this congregation is and of our lives in this moment, it is to show with a robust and joyful heart. It doesn't have to be this way. Look. Look. One of the answers that I have in my life to what is saving my life right now is you. Is this church. Especially when we're at our best and we show up as a place that doesn't have to choose between joy and depth. It doesn't mean that we ignore suffering at all. It means that we show up for it with a robust and human love immediately. A joyfully deep community looks like us being present for one another in the midst of suffering. That when one of us in this room, and this church has seen so much loss this year, we have lost so many members and friends and children of members and friends. It doesn't mean that we ignore that. It means we show up for you and say, we're not going anywhere. Look. Joyfully deep. When our member Billy McDonald died earlier this year, who had been the jazz trombone player in the band for years, when he was diagnosed with liver cancer and knew that he had just a matter of weeks left, I have almost never seen someone die so well. The relationships that he cultivated meant that literally at his house there was a line and a guest book to get into the door to greet him before he died. With people singing and holding his hands, and this man who knew that his life was about to end, holding my hands and kissing them and saying, I love you, Aaron, the last thing he said to me. That was joyful depth. It means that when we see that the world is falling apart around us, that we say, look, look. That we march in the streets, that we call our senators, that we show up for one another in a way that says this doesn't have to be this way. Joyfully deep means celebrating together, but in ways that are powerful and profound. I had the extreme honor last week of officiating a wedding for a couple in this church, two women who have been together 45 years, but didn't know they could get married until now. Let me tell you what it was like to be in that room with people who waited 45 years to be legally married. With tears in their eyes, there was nothing superficial about that joy. That was like food to a person who had been lost in the coldest place on earth. This church at its best saves my life. Because here I have learned that nothing can take away our ability to show up for one another in profound ways. No politician, no religious leader, no natural disaster, not death or disease or hunger or dismay or terror, nothing can take away our ability to know that we are connected in mysterious ways and to love one another with as much force as we can muster. And so when we ask you to double down and reaffirm your commitment to this congregation, when we ask you to fund this place and show up for this place and make a pledge, this is not some superficial, abstract ask. This is asking not whether you make a choice between joy and death, but whether you make a choice between cynicism or engagement. Whether or not you look at the suffering of the world and say, no, we will show up, look. Whether you believe that this place is in some way the answer to what is saving your life and the lives of others. And I believe it is. This is the community that you're invited to build. This is the community that you're invited to build. The one where young and old join together. The one where people of many backgrounds and faiths and belief come together not to retreat from the world, but to engage it. Where we promise that we believe a more loving and kind and just world is possible. And where we affirm that it will begin right here, right now with us. That we have depth and joy at the same time. My friends, I pray that you find an answer to what saves your life and that you support it with everything you have. May it be so, and amen.